Hi, this is Gloria Heck with RE/MAX Direct and the Gloria Sales Real Estate Team. Today we're going to be going over our monthly market report for June, so hang on. Every month I provide a monthly market report to help keep you informed on what's happening in real estate. Today we're going to be talking about a slight shift in the market. We'll discuss interest rates, we'll review where the market sits right now, and ultimately we'll talk about what's ahead. So I want to jump right in. If we think about the first 6 months of this year, the market has been defined by rising mortgage rates. There's an old saying, when the rates rise, they take the elevator, and when they come down, they take the steps. We've seen this quick and dramatic rise in mortgage rates. Let's take a look at what's happening in mortgages right now. The weekly monitor from Freddie Mac says that the average 30-year fixed rate is 5.09% in this country. Sam Cater, the chief economist, said mortgage rates continue to inch downward this week, but are still significantly higher than last year, affecting affordability and purchase demand. Heading into the summer around the country, the potential home buyer pool has shrunk and supply is on the rise and the housing market is normalizing, end quote. Well, this is welcome news following the unprecedented market tightness over the last couple years. On May 19th, he said, quote, economic uncertainty is causing mortgage rate volatility, end quote. I think that's been the story up until now. There's a lot of economic uncertainty. A lot of things are going on. Inflation, instability in the world, and a question as to what the Fed is doing. All these things are causing mortgage rate volatility. One thing I want to point out is that we are now starting to see adjustable rate mortgages, which we haven't seen in a long time. So we wrapped up 2021 with 3.1% on the average for a 30-year fixed rate. We've also seen this quick and dramatic rise in interest rates over the first several months this year. Rates started to clearly plateau sometime around the third week in April. The last several weeks since then, rates have mobilized horizontally versus up, and that's a good thing. We don't want to see mortgage rates going higher as it eats into affordability, it eats into purchasing power that consumers have when they come to buy a home. What we don't know is, have the rates peaked? Well, nobody has a crystal ball. Well, we can clearly see that there's a plateauing in the rates where we've moved horizontally over the last 2 to 7 weeks. The average 30-year fixed rate of 5.09% is higher than where we've been in the last decade, but it's still below where we've been in the previous decades. Before this, going on way back to the 70s. So people ask, are we in a housing correction? Mark Zandi wrote an article a few weeks ago and he said, quote, we're in a full-blown correction, end quote. Well, I'll give you my take on what's happening shortly. Well, we're seeing headlines that read, rising interest rates, existing home sales are down, and are we in a market correction or has the real estate market peaked? All of these headlines are doing more to terrify us than they do to actually clarify what's really happening in the real estate market. So here's the question. Are we in a housing market correction? Well, the quick answer to that is no, we're not. Why is that? Well, the technical definition of a correction of any sort of decline is 10% or greater in the price of the security asset or financial market. So if you want to change the definition of a correction, then you could say, yeah, we're experiencing a correction. But if you go with the definition of a correction, we're not in a housing correction. And I can say that confidently. And why is that? Experts are forecasting almost 9% appreciation in residential real estate this year. If you think about that, historically, homes appreciated at a rate of 3.8%. But 2020 and 2021 were an anomaly with real estate appreciation homes in this country, shooting way up. Now, in 2022, we're still getting healthy appreciation this year. So that's not a correction. There are some changes in the market. We are at a turning point. We're starting to see some indicators of a new direction. But the ball is still in the seller's courts in most of our housing markets. And here in South Florida, we're seeing 20% price appreciation. But we're still at a turning point, coming out of 2 years of an anomaly in our real estate business. So no doubt about it, we're still in a seller's market with more buyers and there are available homes for sale. Here's a couple of slides from our monthly market report. First, we're going to see from showing time. This is a look at showing time going all the way back to the beginning of 2019. That's the gray area, 2019 and the first couple of months of 2020. I'm going to call this pre-pandemic. And the blue section is everything since the pandemic hit, up until the most recent information. April here, we're looking at activity from April. Now, I know we're in June now, but we're going to say April doesn't matter and it's coming down from here. I would agree, but April is the most recent information that we have. We're clearly heading back to some place where you would probably say pre-pandemic levels. So we're not going back to pre-pandemic prices because prices have appreciated. But if you look at pre-pandemic demand, we're going to come off the highs of the 2020s and 2021s back to pre-pandemic levels of 2017, 2018, which were excellent years for real estate in this country. This gives us a visual image of demand and where we've been again with two anomalous years, 2021 and 2020, where interest rates drop. The meaning of home changed across this country in that time. And we saw demand and we saw price increases because of lack of supply that we've never seen before in real estate. So where we're heading in demand, we're going back to pre-pandemic levels. Let's also go to the next headline that accompanies this. Are we in a market correction? Are existing home sales down? So let's look at existing home sales. This is as of April. The seasonally adjusted rate, 5.6 million homes. Well, again, here, let's look at 2017, 18, 19, and pre-pandemic years, and then let's look at 2020 and 21, which were anomaly years. Where are we heading with existing home sales? Back somewhere in the neighborhood of where we were pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic sales were 5.5, 5.3 million. Most recently here in April, seasonally adjusted, were 5.6 million units of existing home sales. That's not total home sales, that's just existing home sales. So as we look at the demand for perspective, from an existing home perspective, really what we're looking at is a situation heading back to where we were prior to the pandemic. And of course, the pandemic heated up the real estate market. We ate in our home, we schooled our kids at home, we worked at home, and we know some of those changes are sticking around after the pandemic. We certainly know that the drop in interest rates fueled people that wanted to buy and said, now is the time for a lot of different reasons. As interest rates have risen, it causes a moderation of the market, bringing us to pre-pandemic levels. But if we were to start to look at where we've been in this market and where we are from the most recent information, which is the average days on the market. As of April, homes are on the market for 17 days before they go under contract in this country. We're still in a very, very hot market, especially here in South Florida. Maybe not as hot as before, but still demand and 20% home appreciation. The average home for sale still receives an average of 5.5 offers. We're heading back to pre-pandemic levels and the volume of our business. So let's talk about what's ahead. This is a look at total home sales forecasted this year from Fannie, Freddie, and the MBA and NAR. Anywhere from 6.9 million home sales this year to 6.1 million. To put that into perspective, in 2021, we sold 6.9 million homes in this country. And most would say, in the interest rate environment we're in, we're likely to see that impact on the market to the tune of about 10%. So in the interest rate rise, we're likely to see that impacted on our market by 10% or less in home sales. So if we take that 6.9, that's about 700,000 homes less than we would sell this year. So these forecasts 6.1 to 6.9 million home sales, depending on what happens with the interest rates, and also depends on what happens with consumer demand, what happens with the economic uncertainty in the country. Experts don't believe that the market is in a bubble or a crash is in the cards like the Great Recession. The nation is still suffering from a housing shortage that has reached crisis proportions at a time when many millennials are reaching the age when they start to consider homeownership. That's likely to keep prices high. I've talked extensively about this, and again, we're not in a bubble. A crash is not coming. But what's important here, and I would pay attention to this quote, that millennials are reaching an age when they start to consider home ownership. So millennials are working through the peak home buying years. We know they are the second largest generation behind baby boomers, just behind them a little bit. But as they move through, they're driving demand. We know we don't have the number of homes on the market for the number of people that want to buy. So that's not going away tomorrow. And that lack of supply keeps upward pressure on the prices across the country. So those that are wondering, are we in a correction? Are homes going to lose value? You can bring the expert perspective. We also can bring the real world perspective of what's happening with millennials and the demand they're bringing on real estate. I think when we think about how is the real estate market, one thing that's at a real fever pitch right now is the worry about being in a recession in this country with the Fed's action of raising Fed funds rates, which, by the way, is not the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. That's intended to slow the economy. If that's not done precisely, that puts us potentially into a recession, and we'll need to watch that going forward. By the way, recession is defined by the National Bureau of Economic Research, and the technical definition is a significant decline in the economic activity spreading across the economy lasting more than a few months. And they go on to say, there's also kind of an industry definition that we have 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, but defined by the National Bureau of Economic Research, and that's their definition of a recession. As you get into the more technical elements of it, not suggesting that we need to be experts on the technical elements of defining recession, but I think every time somebody who's a homeowner hears of a recession, they hear of a housing crash and they hear of a housing crisis because of what's happened in 2008 and the fear of that. If you go all the way back to the early figures, there have been actually 6 recessions in this country. And what happened here, you can see, just in the graphs, 4 out of the 6 times home prices actually appreciated. 2 times they depreciated, early 90s, less than 2%, a marginal depreciation. But what everybody remembers is 2008, when homes lost 20% value. A lot of people were hurt then. A lot of family members, a lot of people, maybe we know and maybe ourselves, had to make a decision on housing or do something. They had to do a short sale, a deed in lieu, a foreclosure, whatever it was. A lot of people were affected back then. And then when they hear about recession, they are very fearful. Many people think that every time we hit a recession, homes lose value. That's simply not true, as you can see from the graphic. So here's a quote from Shivani Peterson, who's a mortgage expert. If you're looking to buy a home, I would still recommend you do so, even at higher interest rates, because we have no reason to believe that home prices will stop appreciating. Home values going up is only a problem if you're trying to buy. When you own, it's a gift. That's a great perspective. When you own a home and prices are rising, that means equity. We've talked extensively about equity in some of my earlier videos, about the difference between a renter and a home buyer and a homeowner, and the difference especially with the net worth. A lot of that, the majority of that, is through home ownership and the stability and security that home ownership brings. Helping people achieve the American dream is one of the reasons why I love this business. Thank you so much for taking the time to view my monthly market report. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything.